1848, another GMT reprint of an XX game. As usual, components are fantastic. This is another one of the Lonnie games, or I'm going to start calling them the Oo brothers. Helmut Ole and Leonard Ogler. They've done a number, maybe all of, I'm not sure of this, of the games that GMT has picked up. Very prolific designs, often interesting and different types of designs, although they do have certain ideas that permeate those designs. Like I said, as usual, the components are fantastic. You get these really, really thick track counters and tokens. Tokens instead of discs, wooden discs for the station markers and whatever. Honestly, I prefer these. The discs are just too thick. When prices start conglomerating, they cause issues. But on the other hand, when I have the wooden discs and the tokens, both in the same game, I use the damn wooden discs. So it's especially important for me that there's no damn wooden discs. Let's talk a little bit about the components and what is a little different of this game. First of all, the tracks look pretty standard. You've got a K-type city, which is reflected on the board. There aren't a lot of these Ks to mark the yellow Ks. There's actually 5 Ks on the board total. One of them's here in Perth. That doesn't count. But there's actually room that a fourth token, a fourth K token would make sense. If you need to, there's these white discs, which could be used as something extra. There's also other things like these number discs. You'll have probably extras of some of them as well. Let's talk about those number discs. What are different about these? Well, these are the means of showing the par value for the different companies. I don't know how I feel about this. It uses twice as many counters and about the same amount of space as having a par track would, but whatever, you know, it's a funky little thing that is different. You have slightly different track configurations. This is something that these designers like. I don't know how much the greens affect. You have this sucker, which they seem to like to throw in. But for the browns, you don't have the really, oh yeah, you do. You do have the 45s and 46s. I thought they weren't in here. So it should be a fairly standard set with some gray cities for the final upgrade. The map, not that big, not a huge amount of cost to build in terrain. You are going to be seeing something where there's different gauge types in the 4 different regions in the map. That's one of the funky little things that we have here. Oh, what else? This one comes with, obviously, the corporate treasuries. But this one, and you'll see loans. This one comes with cash. I think all the GMT ones do. That makes me happy, even though I'm completely a convert to using chips. You know, a game should have what you need to play it. I'm always, I guess there's a couple that are printed without even an option of cash, or ones that have kind of generic money in them, and it's like, well, I don't want to pay for that. I like the 1880 set, I think it is, the Chinese one that has money that is very specific. This has the pictures that go with Australia, and that's kind of fitting. Okay, what's this? This is the initial bidding for privates, and it's handled a little differently than in any other game. Instead of auctioning things up, you'll be setting prices down for later players to choose. And we'll see how that works. It's a funky little twist that I haven't seen before. Your trains, you have a train that becomes kind of an optional purchase, but it doesn't really count as your train. It doesn't count as a forced train purchase or whatever. But otherwise, fairly standard. trains across this side. Over here, you got plus trains. Now, the way the trains work in this that's a little funky is all the trains are able to hit what I call doinkers, these little towns and small harbors that are not huge money makers. They can hit them and collect the income from them for free. They don't count against the train size. So what's up with the plus trains then? The biggie with the plus trains is they're able to make a gauge change without it being a cost. Normally, when you transit from one gauge to another, you end up having to pay one of your stations, one of your big stations for that. The 2E train allows you to run between Alice Springs and one other location. I think you have to have a station in that station marker in that location, and ignore all intervening aspects. It does not count as a regular train. It's just extra income that you're able to generate if you have that cash there. Standard 10% shares and 20% presidencies that you see in most XX games. Another funky thing is the Bank of England. It allows you to take out loans. Loans are different here than they are in most of the games. You're able to take them out at will, one per turn. You're also forced to take out loans if you can't pay for a train. You won't be paying out of pocket. More on that later because you might end up losing money off this, but and what they do is they change the value of the Bank of England shares. The more loans that are out, there's another corporation out there, the Bank of England, that you're allowed to invest in. Initially, it starts at £70, works its way up, gets more and more, and eventually it also will generate income. That income is going to be based on the train that's out. So for example, here we see the Bank of England will be producing £10 per share once the 3 trains are out as a minimum. In addition, it produces income based on, this is certificate limit, based on whatever stations exist for companies that are in receivership. Receivership basically destroys the corporation. The non-director of the company, or the non-president, is able to get their par value back from the bank. So you don't get hosed by a company going into the Bank of England quite as badly as you would due to normal receivership. Receivership happens when the company can no longer, well, actually when it drops off the chart and is no longer considered a functioning of value. At that point, its trains go away and it starts producing additional income for the Bank of England. What are these? Money supply 20 times 100. I don't know if that counts against the bank. I assume it does. I assume it does. So that money is actually here to begin with, some £2,000 in there. So I'll just put that in there, I guess. I don't know why it needs to be there. It's 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. There is a fixed bank in this one, and I've reduced my bank accordingly, putting some of that over there. Let's see, anything else of excitement? On the other side of this, there's an income track. Optional thing entirely, but it's a useful little play aid to see, hey, how well are these corporations, how well have they been doing historically? We got this little chart here. You get bonuses if you can hit multiple K cities with one train. And those bonuses can add up quite a bit. So that becomes kind of a very interesting factor. Let's move this one here just so that I have some room in terms of being able to make better income. Okay. Seating order is randomly, and it's important because this follows a 1830 style stock round where priority goes to the person who passed first and then goes clockwise. I'll be playing counterclockwise because I'm stupid that way, but whatever. Starting capital, fairly high amounts, 430 per person in 6. Okay. First thing that happens is the auction or sale of private companies. This is kind of a weird reverse auction. The player who gets the priority can either buy a private company at its face value or can reduce the value by moving this marker down by $5. There's a minimum that they're allowed to get to. Let me see if I've got this right. In terms of the maximum cost. See, because they say here, place a white disc next to the current price. And that may not be the starting prices. Yeah, it is. Okay, good. Because otherwise it would be confusing. All right. If you're unable to reduce a price because all the companies are at their minimum and you don't own a private company, you must buy one. If you're unable to reduce a price because all the companies are at their minimum price level, but at least one private is in your hands, you can either choose to buy a private company or pass. If all private companies remain unsold, if any private company remains unsold after all players have passed in a turn, those companies that have been sold pay out their income, and then we go back and start over with each player having opportunities to buy, lower a price, or pass. Now, I believe a player who already owns a private company may pass each time. I don't know if that's only if you're unable to reduce prices. It doesn't say that specifically. It's kind of worded in this section, which implies that. A player who already owns a private company may pass each time. Is that a part of unable to reduce a price or not? And I don't know the answer to that. I think I'll make it part of that because otherwise you can just sit there once you have a private company and snipe other people's price reductions. But I don't know how much of a big deal that is. All right, after that, you go to the first stock round where players are going to be able to buy presidencies and or shares from here and shares out of the Bank of England. Okay. Then we jump to the private companies as is normal. The stock round is going to be explained at the end of the rule book, which is kind of funny. I'm not used to that, but I don't see any flaw in doing it that way. It may actually be more sensible to new players. All right, so private companies have a fixed value, which they produce, and that income is written here, and it's also on the private. Oh, there's certificate limits in this game based on the number of players involved in the game, which also tells their starting capital, and the number of companies that are in receivership. The more companies fall into receivership, the less certificates you're allowed to hold. President certificates count as a single certificate, even though they're 20% of the company. Privates do not count at all. Okay. Once a 3+3 train is bought, The private companies, the public corporations I'm going to call them corporations rather than public companies, because otherwise I think there's a problem with calling public companies and private companies. I think making the distinction in corporations versus companies is important. They can be bought at a range that's indicated, and that will be noted on each card. So this one can run from £1 to 40 pounds. Now, its minimum price is actually $0. Its starting price is $30. So you've got, depending on what price you get it at, you might actually get the kind of doubling that you get in 1830 off the corporations. This one, okay, these two cannot be sold. This one may be purchased by a public corporation from $1 to $220. Its initial value is $170, but it can get close to that doubling price. Each of them also has special powers, perhaps. So the first one, the Melbourne and Hobson's Bay, is 5 pounds a round. And that's it. It'll close when the first 5 plus 5 happens. It has nothing special, no track associated with it, nothing like that. None of these seem to have track associated with them. Okay, the Udnadatta is worth 10. If it's owned by the public company, by a public corporation, or its director, you can hold this in your own hands and use this capability. The company can place a yellow tile on the desert for free instead of paying the 40-pound cost. And that is this marker. If the first 5 plus 5 train comes out and the company is still held by the player keeps their right to use the rebate. Likewise, a corporation can keep the right to use that rebate. This can be bought by a public company, blah, blah, blah. The Tasmanian has an income of 15. You get the blue Tasmanian tile. This one comes with it. It's a major port, which can be placed in one of these two spaces. This can be played by any public company on one of the light blue hexes. This is in addition to the company's normal build. If the 5 plus 5 is bought, the Tasmanian tile must be placed on one of the 2 Tasmanian marked light blue hexes. It's not clear. It says by a public company. It's not clear that you have to sell the private to the corporation. And given that the desert one does not have that requirement, I'm going to leave it following that same process. Because the player gets to place the tile if the 5 plus 5 comes out. But the director gets to place it if it's owned. Okay. The gun brings 20. You get a one-time rebate on a purchase of a 2E train. Well, what that rebate is like, half price. If you still own, if the 5 plus 5, if the 5 train comes out, you retain the right to rebate and use it for a company of which you're the director. If it's owned by a corporation, the corporation can keep that right and use it. The Trans-Australian Railway. This comes with 10% of the QR. This is this one. And that'll be an extra share. This and the next one cannot be sold to corporations. You just hold them until the 5 train comes out and it crashes. The North Australian Railway makes 30 a round. You get the director's share of the Canadian Australian Railway with this. So it's kind of like a B&O type thing. And that'll be at a fixed par value of 100. And it's closed as soon as the CAR buys a train or with the sale of the first 5 train. Chances are somebody holding 20% of it, it's going to float from what we're used to with these kind of companies that start with shares out there. Public companies, they have differing number of station markers. We also have markers to use on the backside of that to record the last run price. We have one for the share price. We do not need one for the par value. Okay. New shares are in here. They're purchased at par value always. That does not go into the company treasury. This is going to use an 1830 style full capitalization. You hit 60%, 100% of the money goes into the corporate treasury and you float. Old shares go in the bank pool and they'll be tracked by the price up here, the same as the ones that players hold. Now, dividends do not get paid out for anything that's held, that's not held by players. So the only way you're going to make money with your corporations is, well, from privates, I guess, but also from swallowing. This is different from a lot of these designers' games. A lot of times they try to put other little mechanisms in that allow you to get income. I got to swap batteries. Company floats, it's able to operate once 60% of its shares have been bought, even if they end up in the bank pool or whatever. One of the companies is special, the Commonwealth Railways. This automatically, okay, when you buy the presidency, you set the price, and the share prices run 70, 80, 90, and 100 pounds for all the corporations except Central Australian, which is fixed. The company is launched and begins to operate once 60% of its shares have been bought, and a notional train can travel from Sydney to Adelaide. That notional train can ignore tokens in the way. All that it has to do is you have to say there's track connecting those two, so that some infinite range train could conceivably make it. If all the conditions for launch are fulfilled before it would be the com's turn to operate, it gets to run in that operating round according to its price value. Otherwise, it has to wait till the next round. It doesn't get a catch-up. When the purchase of the first 6 train, or 6 plus, that special link requirement is dropped, and it'll be dealt with just like any other corporation, except it has home stations in both of these cities, I guess. That is not well specified elsewhere. It says home station, home station. But there are some special rules about its home stations. If in one or both of the cities, nowhere does it actually say these are their home stations. If in one or both of the of the cities there is no place for the home station for that city, the token is laid on the edge of the tile or an undeveloped hex. A station token of the com lying on the edge of a hex tile has the same properties of any place station token, but if a hole opens up, it falls into that and fills it. So it's conceivable, although probably unlikely, that there could be 3 station tokens in one or both of those cities, and they allow a 4th station token. Generally, I think that'll get resolved before you get to the brown tiles. But, don't know, because the 6th train triggers it, and the 6th train is in the brown track. The Bank of England. Okay, the Bank of England has 2,000 pounds of extra money. I'm assuming it's part of the bank because here's what happens. Over here they tell me there's 9 denominations of bank money, $10,000, 20 100-pound notes for the Bank of England, 2,000 pounds. I'm assuming that money comes out of the bank if it's used, and that's the only reason I can see for that little space down there. Okay. During your normal stock rounds, you can buy these suckers, and each share will get 10% of the Bank of England's income. The shares are always bought and sold at the indicated price, which is listed above the current loan value. The Bank of England pays out dividends. In each phase, it's got a total minimum dividend that it pays out. In the yellow phase, that's nothing. And you increase that total dividend by any cities that have stations from companies in receivership. And that could be multiples of the same company. Oh, I'm sorry, multiple companies in the same city. So that city will get counted multiple times for the Bank of England in that case. Trains are removed from the bank when the second company goes into receivership. The cheapest permanent train is destroyed, not 2Es. When the fifth company is taken over by the bank, the cheapest permanent train is removed from the game, and I believe the game goes on a sudden death timer. It's one of the end game conditions. Trains removed from the game are regarded as being sold, and they can cause a phase change. If a company gets to the leftmost column in the share price mark, the company is taken over by the Bank of England. The company has to pay compensation at initial share price for all shares owned by players other than the director. The director gets no compensation. He screwed this shit up. If the company doesn't have enough capital to pay compensation, the director has to pay. And he may have to sell other shares to cover that cost. The company may not in this situation take out further loans in order to pay compensation. The director is liable. If the director doesn't have enough money, he has to sell his shares. If this doesn't raise enough money, he must borrow the money from the bank interest-free. That's not the Bank of England, that's this bank. You just record it on paper or whatever. When he gets that cash, he pays it off. He doesn't have any money in hand until he pays that off. So he can't do any purchases until he pays that off. The certificate limit will be changed, and you might end up having to sell off shares in your next stock round because you've gone over the certificate limit this way. In a 3 or 4 player game, the director of a company that goes into receivership loses 2 additional certificate limits. There is not an easy marker for this. Bank of England operates. Put that there. In 5 or 6 players, it's a reduction of 1 for the director. Any remaining money in the company's treasury goes back to the bank. Trains and other stuff is removed. Station tokens are flipped over. And unfortunately, they don't say Bank of England on the other side. It would be kind of cool if they did. I don't know what this is. Priority marker, maybe? It can be my other K. Yeah. It does not. I don't know what that's for. Okay. The Bank of England's income goes up for each city that there's a station marker of a company that's in receivership for it. It goes up by the value of the current value of the city. Once the first 3 trains have been purchased, companies, corporations can take out loans from the Bank of England. A company can take out a maximum of 1 loan per operating round. When it takes out a loan, it gets £100. The share price of the Bank of England goes up. A loan can be taken out at any time during a company's turn, including before laying a tile or placing a station token. The loan is never paid back, and it doesn't cost you any interest. However, when you take out a loan, your share price of your public company is moved 2 spaces to the left, more painful than swallowing, and the Bank of England increases. If a company takes out more than one loan in an operating round, possible in a mandatory train purchase, the second and subsequent loans each shift it 3 to the left. This can dump you into receivership in the midst of your loan taking and may put you in a position where you have to compensate the other players. And that's based on initial share price, the par value for the company, because obviously it's not worth anything in receivership. Mismanaging the companies in this has a serious consequence, it looks like. Directorship changes as normally in an XX game. If somebody else has more shares than the director, the directorship changes hands, and 2 normal certificates are exchanged for the president's certificate. Okay, operating rounds. During the operating rounds, they increase as the color of the track increases. Turn order, private companies pay out first, then the Bank of England operates. I don't know if we really need this. This is one of these, this is probably to keep track of the current value of it. But anyway, Bank of England operates next and pays out whatever it's due to pay out. And then you follow normal kind of share price rules, which is highest value goes first, furthest to the right goes before to the left, if same value. Top of the stack, first person to get to that space, or first corporation to get to that space, goes before anyone lower in the stack. Sequence of play, you're allowed to lay track. I think I've seen this before. You're allowed double yellow track lays once the 3 train is purchased. Upgrades are as normal, and in the first phase of the game, when only 2 trains are sold so far, you're only allowed to lay 1 yellow track. You can purchase your station tokens. These are, I think you're allowed 1 per operating round max. They're relatively normal, $40 for your second station token, $100 for each other. The one corporation, the Commonwealth or whatever, that has 2 starting cities, pays $100 right off the bat for their additional ones. Then you operate the trains. You choose to pay dividends or withhold completely. Share price moves. 1 to the right for paying out, 1 to the left for swallowing. Can go up and down if you're on the edge of the board. All operating rounds run. Okay. Laying track tiles. These are pretty much normal rules for this. You start at your starting token, and you're allowed to lay track. There are some weird things with the restrictions on here. Trying to remember what it is. There's some weird things with upgrades that we have to look at. A company can only upgrade a tile if after the upgrade it contains track along which the company could run a train. So I think you can add track you can't reach. Existing track may not be broken or lost as a result. That's standard. Tiles without stations may only be, that's all standard for an XX type game. The different parts of Australia have different rail gauge. If as a result of laying or upgrading a tile, a gauge change occurs, track crosses from an area of one background color to another, one of these white discs gets put on the border between the 2 territories. And there's a picture of that somewhere here. I'm going to show how that's done. This counts against the range of trains running the route as though it were a large station with value 0. The plus trains are allowed to contain 1 of those in their run. Station markers, 1 per hex maximum. I think you're only allowed to play one per turn. I don't see that yet. Yeah. You have to connect to the station to get there. If it's a home base of a company that has not yet been in operations, other companies may only build stations there if they have at least a free space there for the other company to start. This rule does not apply to the home stations of the COM. And again, they don't tell you what the home stations of the COM are, but the only cities that are specified are those two. The types of trains, we've talked about these. So a normal number train can hit as many large stations as its number, and as many small stations as it happens to hit are just added on for free. The plus trains, their only bonus is they're allowed to pass through one gauge change without paying for it out of their big number. The diesel, there's two, when the first 6 train is bought, or 6 plus, the diesels become available, well, the 8s and diesels become available, I guess. It doesn't actually say that there. But it does say it here. Right. These become available after the purchase. Oh no, the second, sorry. Okay, so you got to clear out the 6s. The route of a diesel can include any number of stations and any number of gauge change markers and any number of harbors. The route has to hit one of your station tokens. When the first 8 or D train is purchased, you're allowed to trade in a 4 train, or 4 plus, to get $300 off the cost of one of these. Now that's a hell of a deal on the 8 train. If that's the case. Yep. But the first 8 or diesel crashes the 4s, so only one person gets that bonus. The GON train counts Alice Springs and the city where it starts. It can never get a KK bonus. Owning a 2E does not count as a train for your requirement. It doesn't count against your train limit. You're allowed at most 1, and they cannot be traded. When you purchase a train, you do it after you run your trains as normal. You purchase it from the bank at the price on the card. They must be bought in ascending sequence. There's 2 different types. You get to choose which one you want to pay for, the more expensive or the cheaper. You can buy trains from other companies. When you buy it from another, I should be saying corporation here, but when you buy it from another company, the transaction takes place at the end of the purchasing player's turn. You can choose any price with a minimum of £1. However, you can only buy it from train. The director has to be the same between the 2 corporations. This is something these designers like to do. I have occasionally seen reasonable cases where someone wants to buy a train from someone else, and the someone else wants to sell it at that price, and it's all for legitimate non-king-making purposes. I have never seen someone do this for king-making purposes. I have seen other aspects done for king-making. If you look at the etiquette for this game, you're never allowed to make a deal with more than 2 players, is one of their etiquette rules. I don't know if these are required or not. It's kind of weird because most of the etiquette aren't really rules. They're things that are normal, like you must keep your material open and clearly visible. Yeah, well, somebody just says, well, let me see what you got. You shouldn't lengthen playing time unnecessarily. You should think what you're going to do. Your holdings must be viewable at all times. But this is the one that's different from everything else. Agreements between several parties are in general forbidden. However, ahead of that, there's players should decide before the game what type of agreements are permitted and whether agreements are binding. I feel like they're going too far out of their way to try to prevent people from colluding, as though that's a real problem in their view. I have not. I've seen one game of XX where there was a pre-game collusion, and I was involved in it, between two players that was really probably going against the spirit of things. My damn battery is not charging unless I set it properly. I probably have to turn it upside down. Sometimes it works better one way, sometimes it works better the other. All right, where are we? We're on the trains. Well, my battery's about ready to die, and there aren't a whole hell of a lot of rules, so I'm going to swap out. Normal, the phase determines how many trains you're allowed to have, and that's again listed here somewhere. Well, here train limit is 4. Here it goes down to 3, etc. Unfortunately, the phase changes are written under the spaces that hold the trains. That's a little disturbing, but it does save some space and present the information there. And it's present here as well. If you don't have a train, you must. If the share, you may be able to do this by taking loans out. $100 each very quickly adds up to the value of a train. If a share price falls into receivership, the purchase is not made even if the company has enough money. The train stays in the bank, and the company is administered by the Bank of England. The director cannot put his own cash in ever towards buying a train. A company is only allowed to take out one loan unless it's forced to take a train, in which case it can take out as many as it can avoid. It can take out as many until it falls into receivership. Remember, those each send you back 2 to 3 spaces. If there are no loans left in the Bank of England, and you need to take a loan because of a mandatory purchase, your company just falls into receivership somehow. Phase track. Okay, we got the different phases here. There's nothing too exciting, I think. Private companies can be bought starting with the 3. Loans start with the 3. Sale of trains between companies start. Private companies, I think I already said that, 2 operating grounds. 4 train rusts the 2 train, and the limit goes down to 3. 5 train brings brown tiles out, and the 2E train becomes available. I'll just throw them into the bank pool or whatever. The Bank of England starts paying a larger minimum. 3 operating rounds each. Train limit goes down to 2. This doesn't crush any trains. I don't know if anywhere it says what happens if you're over the limit. But the standard thing is that they go into the bank pool. That doesn't appear to be stated here. So I guess you just discard them. 6 train, the 3s become obsolete. The COM can operate without connecting. The 8D, the grays become available. This is different. A lot of games, the 6 train is where the grays come in. Nope, here it's the 8s. And I think that's kind of, these designers like to do that. And it kind of makes sense. You go from yellow to green to brown to gray. But I'm used to the 6s triggering that gray. Bank of England dividend goes up. Routes, fairly standard. You can run between 2 different cities in the same hex. But remember, you can't have 2 tokens in the same hex. So this is kind of like an 1830 situation. You're able to loop around, hit those ooh-oohs. These are the only things that have two locations in them. You can hit both of them, but you might not have access to go through them both. Blockage is normal by tokens. Harbors in Tasmania, there's 2 small harbors on the map. They don't count against your train number. They're freebies like doinkers are, but they might produce more than the $10 that a doinker does. No upgrades for the doinkers, by the way. Oh, this is an interesting piece. It's an ooh-ooh with only 1. The yellow level of the ooh-ooh, instead of being sort of Oh, where the fuck oh, there they are. The yellow level of the UU allows you to connect to one city. The green level brings you up to what you'd be used to with the UU tracks. Tasmania counts against your total, and you can see it's a reasonable city. As good as a brown UU, which is pretty decent, but it's an endpoint, which sucks. Perth is worth a lot. Alice Springs, not so much. Calculate income for trains as normal. Can't run over the same track between two different runs. You can hit the same cities, though, as long as you're not using the same track. Standard stuff here. Company income. If the income's paid out in dividends, the money goes forward. It doesn't tell you where the share price marker happens. That's here. Okay, KK bonus. If you hit multiple Ks with a single train, you get that additional bonus to the run. Really, really, really big thing. Really big. 2 Ks is one extra city. Each additional K is another big city hitting. And that happens right at the beginning. So this is a huge income bonus early in the game. Of course, those Ks are not close to each other. Paying dividends. Share moves to the right, up if it can't move further right. Retaining income. Share price decreases to the left. And if it drops into receivership, oops. Okay. Now we go to stock rounds. Nothing too exciting here. You're allowed to sell as many shares as you like, and then you may buy one share. And you can pass. You can't buy from a company that you've sold earlier in that stock round. You can't exceed your certificate limit. Private companies don't count against it. You can buy 10% shares once the presidency's out. This is all normal stuff. You also have the option to buy the shares from the Bank of England. They don't go up in value except through loans being produced. You can sell shares. You can sell your railway company shares, but not in the first stock round of the game. You can't sell. There can only be 50% in the bank pool. The director's share certificate can never be in the bank. This is the normal thing. You've got to have somebody who's holding 20% to dump it on. Shares sold as a result of insolvency do not trigger a change in director. That's weird. I don't know. I guess you can't sell the director shares of any companies when you have to pay compensation. Selling shares of the Bank of England, this can be done without restriction to the current price. They return there. They don't affect anything, basically. They're just investments that you have. Whenever you sell a company's shares, the share price marker moves down one space per sale, not per share. Again, they don't like to have the stock slamming, these designers. If a company's share price marker is at the bottom of a column, it doesn't move. It stays in the same space and in the same operating order. Bank of England doesn't affect you to change to sell shares. At the end of a stock round, if all the shares of a company are in player hands, the share price moves up one level. Normal stuff. Bank of England not affected. Turn order as normal. How does the game end? Game ends when the bank runs out of money. The company's share price has reached the highest possible position. The Bank of England has given 16 or more loans. There's only 20 there. And there are 5 or more companies being administered by the Bank of England. Any of those will end the game. You can't go bankrupt as a player. If the bank runs out of money, unpaid dividends are noted on a piece of paper. We throw more money into the bank. These amounts count towards the player's final total, just as if they're actual money. If the bank runs out of money during a stock round, you play an entire set of operating rounds. Okay. This doesn't tell you what happens. So bank runs out of money. We understand how that works. Company share price gets highest spot. I think after that company runs, the game ends. Let's keep looking. Bank of England has given 16 or more loans. We don't know. That shouldn't automatically end the game because, that shouldn't stop it immediately because there are additional loans. There's no reason you'd go to the 17th loan at that point. The game would just end, right? So there's got to be something that happens, at least those additional loans for a mandatory train purchase, but let's keep looking. There are 5 or more companies being administered by the Bank of England. Again, or more. What's that supposed to mean? Is it possible for 2 to fall in at the same time? Maybe due to stock sales. No. Okay, so let's go back to the Bank of England and see if we can get something, because I don't think this is spelled out in the rules. And again, there's probably questions about it, but we'll use reason instead. So end of game trigger. As soon as the 5th company goes into receivership, the game finishes at the end of the current set of operating rounds. I'm going to use that as the same limit for the 16 or more loans. That you finish out that entire set of operating rounds. That's like the bank breaking. And it just seems to make sense to me. Again, it's not spelled out. I think that's the intention. Maybe I'm wrong, and it probably won't change things too much either way. So that's the game. We will start playing fairly soon. And I'm looking forward to it. I was playing the 3 battles in Germany, and I did not enjoy that. I have Hanau set up there, kind of waiting to be played. I'm intending to do that next. But I need a break, and I've picked up a bunch. I've got like 3 XXs, including this one, sitting on the burner, and I decided, you know what? This is the most recent in terms of publication. The others are older ones that I've grabbed from other companies that I can wait on. And Alice Springs has this little thing. That's this little symbol. I don't know what that's for. I do not know. The Gone has it as well. It's the special bonus. It's that $100 off. Once you use that, it's gone. Okay, it's gone. All right, up it goes.